something just happened in this Blake lively situation. And it completely flipped the energy around the case. Not in a dramatic, explosive way, in a quiet, almost surgical way. The kind of moment where, if you're not paying attention, you miss it. But if you are paying attention, you realize everything just shifted. Because for a while now, it looked like Blake's team had momentum. The headlines were strong. The narrative was clear. The messaging was landing. It felt like she was controlling the story. And then the court responded. And just like that, everything slowed down. Because what she tried to do here wasn't small. This wasn't just another legal motion. This was a power move. She went into federal court asking for something very specific and very aggressive. She wanted Justin Baldoni's lead attorney, Bryan Freedman, to be punished, not just criticized, punished, fined, reprimanded on his professional record, forced to pay her legal fees out of his own pocket. And on top of that, she left the door open for something even bigger, removing him from the case entirely. Think about that for a second. If that had worked, it wouldn't just weaken the other side. It would disrupt their entire structure. Their lead strategist, their legal voice, the person who's been shaping their defense from the beginning, gone. That's not a small move. That's not routine. That's a strategic attempt to change the balance of the case itself. And on paper, it looked strong. There were arguments. There were exhibits. There was a narrative that framed this as something serious, something that needed intervention. And for a moment, it worked. Because the media picked it up exactly the way you'd expect. Headlines started circulating that the opposing lawyer was trying to influence the jury, that there was misconduct, that something inappropriate had happened behind the scenes. And that's how these things usually play out. The filing creates the headline. The headline creates perception. And perception starts shaping how people see the case. But here's where things changed. Months later, the judge responded. And the response wasn't long. It wasn't detailed. It wasn't emotional. It was one paragraph. And in that one paragraph, the entire motion collapsed. Denied. That was it. No fine. No punishment. No removal. Nothing. Now here's the part most people miss. The judge didn't come out and say the lawyer was right. He didn't defend him. He didn't validate everything he did. Instead, he did something more subtle. He sidestepped the entire argument. He basically said, even if we assume everything Blake is saying is true, even if we give her every benefit of the doubt, she still didn't prove the one thing that actually matters. That this would affect a jury. And that detail is everything. Because in a situation like this, that's the core issue. Not whether something was said, not whether it was aggressive, not whether it was controversial, but whether it actually threatens the fairness of the trial. And she couldn't show that. Which means legally, the foundation of her request wasn't there. And without that foundation, the rest of the argument doesn't hold. It becomes noise, structured noise, expensive noise, but still noisy. Now let's talk about timing, because this is where it gets even more interesting. The statements she was complaining about were made months before the trial, almost a year out. And that creates a problem. Because now you're asking the court to believe that something said that far in advance is still strong enough to influence a future jury. That's a hard argument to win. You need a clear line, a direct connection, a cause and effect. And what the judge is basically saying is, that connection wasn't there. It wasn't convincing. It wasn't concrete. And that's why the motion failed. But here's where things get a little uncomfortable for her side, because inside this same case, her own team had already described that same lawyer as someone credible, influential, respected, someone whose words carry weight. They used that description to support their own arguments elsewhere, which creates a contradiction. Because now you're saying he's credible and people listen to him, and at the same time, his statements are unfair and dangerous and need to be punished. Both can't fully exist without tension, and courts notice tension. They notice inconsistency. They notice when arguments shift depending on what's convenient. And even if that wasn't the deciding factor, it doesn't help. Now, here's the bigger picture. Because this isn't just about one motion. This is about strategy. There are two battles happening here at the same time. The legal battle and the narrative battle. And sometimes they move at different speeds. The legal system moves slowly, carefully, deliberately, but the media moves instantly. And that creates a gap. The accusation spreads fast. The ruling arrives later, quietly, without the same energy, without the same attention. So for a period of time, it looked like something major had happened. It felt like momentum had shifted. But in reality, nothing changed legally. And that's the difference people don't always see. Filing something in court and winning something in court are two completely different things. One creates tension. The other creates consequence on this chimi. Only the attention part worked. Now let's be fair for a second. This doesn't mean her entire case falls apart. Not at all. This is one moment, one motion, one decision. But it does affect perception. Because when you make a strong move, and it gets chichapiapli notice, especially when the request was this aggressive. Because now the question becomes, was this a calculated legal strategy, or was it more about controlling the narrative? And the answer might be a bit of both. That's how modern cases work now. They're fought in courtrooms and in headlines. And sometimes those two arenas don't align. Now, here's what really matters moving forward. This ruling didn't decide the case. It didn't end anything. It didn't determine who's right or wrong overall. But it did send a signal, a tone, a message from the court that says, you need more than this. More proof, more connection, more substance. And that matters, because judges don't just rule on motions. They observe patterns. They form impressions. And every interaction shapes how the rest of the case is received, so this moment isn't the end, but it is a shift. Quiet one. The kind that doesn't explode, but changes the direction slightly. And sometimes those are the most important ones, because they don't look dramatic, but they change how everything that comes next is interpreted. So now I want to ask you something, and really think about this. Do you think this was just a failed legal move that won't matter long term? Or does it feel like the first real sign that the momentum in this case might be starting to turn?